Armor is a very important stat in any ARPG game, and in every game the armor works very differently. For example,
Armor, instead of just giving you global damage reduction, aka defense, but renamed to armor, now gives you physical reduction, which is great.
that was the case of Diablo 4, and even this being a Diablo game, the armor in this game works very differently. So in this video, we'll be talking about how armor works in Diablo Immortal and also how is block chance related to armor. So let's get into it. If we first look at the tooltip, it says reduces all damage taken and increases blocked amount. When I first read this, reduces all damage taken, I thought this was like an introductory line for this particular stat, like a lore, like a theme of this stat. And I thought it was not like actually true, but while I was making this video, I realized that it is actually true and it reduces all the damage that you take. But the way it reduces all the damage is not a straightforward thing, and it is a bit unexpected or weird, which I'll explain in the video as I go along. But first, let's keep reading the tooltip. It says your armor is higher for your level and the current difficulty increases the damage reduction from blocking by 18% from a base reduction of 50%. Okay, so this is the tooltip and there might be some confusion what it means. So let me simplify this. So let's say you are a necromancer in a battleground and you are facing multiple enemies. Now you can receive two types of hits. It can be a normal hit or it can be a critical hit. So I'm dividing all the damage that you receive in two parts, be it a damage over time or any type of damage. It is either normal hit, basically the normal value, or the critical hit. So let's say your normal hit, it's for you taking 100. So usually the critical hit will be around 200. I'm not saying it will always be exactly 200, but usually it is 100% more, so it is 200. So let's see how armor and block chance is going to reduce these damages. First, we go for the normal hit. So you are receiving a normal hit from an enemy, say for in our example 100. To reduce this 100 damage, what the game has given us is block chance. You have a chance to block this normal hit and the damage that you take is reduced. Now let's read the block chance tooltip. It says increases the chance to block all damage from an enemy attack but will never block critical hits. It says increase the chance to block all damage. So firstly, it is not going to block everything, not going to block the full 100 damage. It is only going to block 50%, that is minimum, but will never block critical hits. That's why we are first talking about normal hits where the block chance works. Block chance does not work for critical hits. So in our scenario, like I said, so if we are able to block this, minimum we will take a 50% reduction, right? Always if you are blocking, you are getting 50% less. But in case your armor is more than the enemy's armor penetration, in the game your armor is compared with enemy's armor penetration, right, the stats. So if your armor is more, you can block even further amount. And if we see the tooltip, that's what it says for armor. In the last line, it says increases your damage reduction from blocking by 16% from a base reduction of 50%. So suppose like I told you, like a base reduction, there's always going to be 50%, and it is further going to reduce it if your armor is more than enemy's armor penetration. So in this way, armor is going to reduce the normal hit damage. How? You are saying the block chance is reducing, so armor is actually helping you to increase the blocked amount, and in that way your armor is going to reduce your normal hit damage. Now obviously if your block chance is very low, the effectiveness of armor is also very low. So that's why block chance and armor go hand in hand, and you should ideally be having, if you are focusing on armor, then you should also focus on block chance. Now we go to critical hit, and the same example, an enemy normally hits you say for 100 damage. Now if that 100 damage crits, it becomes 200 in our example. Later I'll show you that it might be more than that. So it becomes 200 damage, and this can be reduced by armor. How? If you're now, it is again compared with enemy's armor penetration. So say the enemy has 20% more armor penetration than your armor, right? So I'll show you the tooltip here as well. It says that in my example, like in 60 higher, so it is in my critical hit damage is 20% more. So in this case, 20% of 200 is 240. So this 100 becomes 200 from critical hit, and if they have more armor by 60, they are even doing 240, right? And if your armor is more than enemy's armor penetration, say the same example, if you have 60 more armor, then you are going to take 20% reduction. 20% of 200 is 40, so it becomes 160. So in this way, armor is going to reduce your critical hit damage that you take. Remember, I told before that block chance is not going to be effective here. Here only armor is going to be effective. That's why armor is very important stat in this game, because it is reducing the big damage numbers, and also for the normal hits it is going to reduce the damage if you have a good amount of block chance. So to summarize block chance, what did we learn? Block chance is actually reducing your normal damage taken, and it cannot reduce your critical hit damage. And the amount of reduction that the block chance can give you is depending on your armor. If your armor is less than enemy's armor penetration, no problem, block chance is at least 50% effective all the time. But if your armor is more than enemy's armor penetration, then it is going to be more than 50%, like I said in the example. And moving forward, for armor, it affects critical hit damage taken. It is compared with enemy's armor penetration, and the amount of reduction for the armor is, if your armor is less than enemy's armor penetration, you take higher crit damage. And similarly, if your armor is more than enemy's armor penetration, you will take lower crit damage, basically lesser. And it scales. What I mean by it scales, let me tell you. For example, I am in hell 3 right now and my armor is 1000 higher. So the increasing your damage reduction by 18%, so 68% reduction from damage. This is hell 3. Now suppose I go to hell 8, right? So if I go to hell 8, now if I check the tooltip, it says armor is only 155 higher, so my blocking is reduced by 11, is basically the reduction is 61% from 68%. And now even further, if I go to Inferno 2, I'm not sure even if I have the stats. Yes, now my armor is lower. So what happens when the armor is lower? It's that decreases your damage reduction from blocking by 0. So from a base of 50%. So a base of 50% is always there, and reduction is actually reduced. Reduction, you don't get any further reduction. So in this way, the gap between armor and armor penetration is always going to scale, and it is best if you can keep the reduction as low as possible. And it also says increasing enemy critical hit damage by 52%. What does this mean? And it means that if your armor is 813 lower, right, from enemy's critical armor penetration, so you will their critical hit damage will become 52%. In our example, it was normal critical hit damage was 200. Now it is even 50% more. I think that will become 250 or something like that. Finally, one last thing that I want to show you is that I told you, like, normally the critical hit damage is 100 becomes 200, but if you see here, there's another critical hit damage. It says in the additional attributes, if you have this, then your 100 is not going to be 200. This is, suppose this is 20%, this is going to be 220. So critical hit damage, this is like the first filter, and then it is going to match your armor and armor penetration and everything. So you can always have a critical hit damage of higher percentage if you don't want to go to this armor and armor penetration route. But remember, this critical hit damage is strifed in battlegrounds, so this 20% is more like 7% or 6.5%. so yeah, you should keep that in mind. So that is all I want to talk about this video. I hope you found this helpful. Consider subscribing if you like the content, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.